Ordering food delivery feels a lot more luxurious than it used to. Not because the food's gotten any better or
you're paying more money?
The experience or anything really. It's just all gotten a lot more expensive. I put this order together on a delivery app and it came out to $36 with tip. But I'm a consistent guy. I usually order the same thing when I get Chinese food. So I went to my email and looked through some old receipts and saw that in 2019, the same exact order was only $19.27, $26 with inflation. We all know that ordering on the app has made things more
crazy. That 29, it's gone up that much just with inflation? Holy fuck. That's insane.
Expensive. But why? Look at all these fees. Service fee. Okay, that makes sense. They're providing a service. Delivery. But then what's delivery fee? And this one irks me the most. The New York courier fee, which Uber defines as offsetting new minimum wage laws. Minimum wage laws that the companies that make these apps lobbied to kill. It's almost like they're hiding the real reasons costs are so inflated by blaming being forced to give their drivers living wages. The real culprits for making food delivery worse and more expensive are a handful of massive, billionaire-funded corporations.
And that is when it turns into the pile of shit. That is the final stage of enshittification.
And don't tell me I don't need to use these apps. Many restaurants no longer employ in-house delivery workers. And Uber and DoorDash have seized a duopoly on 96% of the on-demand food delivery service business.
This is such a huge problem, and I wish more people realized it, is that just because there are two players inside of a space does not mean that they are not operating as if they are a monopoly. And this is what happens with, for example, the Apple Play Store and the Google Play Store. Like inside of those two apps, you have probably 99% of all of the users for smartphone apps in the entire fucking world, right? Or at least here in the US. It is insane.
They've used that market power to convince us that we needed them to replace a system that was actually working just fine. That scam has made them immensely profitable. Uber's delivery business made $1.5 billion last year. That's a 173% increase from the year before. And DoorDash pulls in a ludicrous 49% margin on delivery. It's
holy fuck.
Middleman capitalism, where a transaction that used to look like this.
I'm gonna order us some pizza. From where? From Sal's.
Now looks like this. And food delivery is just one example of how billionaire middlemen are taking your money and giving you nothing in return.
That's not true. The reason why people order food delivery is because it's useful. So you can order food delivery to any part of the world, like any place that you want. It's convenient, and also the apps for DoorDash and like Uber Eats are really good. They are very good apps. Like, for example, you don't have to download the Domino's app. You don't have to download the Pizza Hut app. You don't have to download the Papa John's app. You just download DoorDash, and then it does everything. So that's the reason why this stuff is popular. And don't say it doesn't provide value, because people wouldn't be paying for it if it didn't have value. It's just that you think the value is maybe overstated, or you think people shouldn't be spending that much money, but there is absolutely a value that people are getting out of this, because that's the reason why they're spending money on it, right? If there was really no value, nobody would be buying it. It's just that simple. Convenience cost? Yes, exactly. And the fact that you only have to use one app, if you think of it, so this is like a problem with like a free market, is that in a free market, it's better that Taco Bell or all the pizza places have their own app, right? Domino's has their app, Pizza Hut has their app, Papa John's has their app, Mr. Gotti's has their app, and all these places have their own app. This is better in a free market, but oftentimes the user and the consumer cannot perceive that that's better. It's not better in their mind. Why the fuck would they care about that? You see what I'm saying? Some of them gives better benefits? Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember these ads from when the early iPhones came out?
If you want to check snow conditions on the mountain, there's an app for that.
Yep.
If you want to check how many calories are in your lunch, there's an app for that.
Right.
Yep. There's an app for just about anything.
That
3G.
catchy slogan symbolized a promise. Whatever you need, there's an app for it.
Right.
The examples in the ad were for things that were handy to have a new tool for.
Absolutely.
And the transactions were simple. Either the apps cost $1 or a couple of bucks, other than the infamous I'm Rich app, which cost $1,000.
Like
and
10 people
nothing,
bought that, I remember.
Or charged some subscription fee. But importantly, most of what the apps did just existed on your phone. Existing web retailers like Amazon slowly began introducing apps, but there weren't many apps that provided real-life services for money.
Well, like the value of an app definitely increases with the amount of things that it can solve and things that it can do interconnectedly. So like if you can have an app that will order from any food restaurant that you want, you will always download that app rather than the app that will only allow you to order from one food restaurant, assuming that you're getting the same prices relatively. And that's the reason why people do this. That's why people gravitate to these two different these apps. If it's cheaper, yeah, for sure. It's common sense.
Through the early 2000s, food delivery was still the domain of Chinese, pizza, and diners. Restaurants saw delivery as an extra table, like as if the delivery guy were just another waiter getting paid a wage plus tips. And
Pretty
a lot of
much, yeah.
restaurants didn't offer delivery because it simply wasn't economical.
Yeah.
Seamless Web, a company that originally just placed large restaurant orders for workplaces, pivoted to individual customers and became Seamless. And Grubhub launched with a bucket of venture capital money.
Yep.
These apps just connected users with the restaurant, who still use their own delivery guy. And Seamless and Grubhub charged the restaurants fees of 15 to 25% and let restaurants charge whatever they want for delivery. Restaurants were pretty happy with this deal because of the volume, so it made it worth it to have a full-time delivery guy. And customers were happy because they had access to a whole new range of restaurants. In 2008 and 2009...
Well, it's great. Like, what are we talking about? The fact that you can order food from anywhere that you want, and you can order it from places that didn't have delivery before, this is a huge service. It's an amazing service. It's great. That's why people are using it. It's not even a question.
A few tech millionaires came together with an idea. An app would let you order a fancy black car at the push of a button. They named it Uber. To understand the kind of guy behind this, the idea was allegedly inspired by Uber co-founder Garrett Camp spending $800 on a private car to go out on New Year's Eve.
Jesus.
And finding that far too expensive.
Yeah.
To understand the kind of guy the other co-founder, Travis Kalanick, is, here's a clip of him talking about how great Camp is.
When you open up that app and you get that experience of like, I pushed a frickin' button and a car showed up, and now I'm a pimp. Garrett is the guy who invented that shit.
Kalanick's old...
And he's fucking right. That's the thing. He's fucking right, because back then, this was unheard of. It was unfathomable. Like in 2010, this was what was happening. It was crazy. So yeah, absolutely true. People do love that. And also, here's another thing. I have Uber. I've used Uber before. The service is fucking amazing. I just click the button, I tell them where I'm at, they pick me up, they take me to where I want to go. It is an amazing service. It's great. Depends on your city. Oh, I'm sure some people have bad experiences, but I'm sure that's true with taxis as well. There's always going to be a variance of experience with any sort of customer service. But my experience has been very good, and I think that collectively the experience for many people is probably pretty good. That's why the app has relatively high ratings.
Twitter avatar was the cover of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, because he, quote, likes architecture. But everyone knows that's not what people read Ayn Rand for. That's like watching The Sopranos.
Watching porn for the plot, yeah.
Because you like pasta.
45 seconds, stir it up real nice.
At the same event as the pimp quote, about 2 years after the launch of Uber, Kalanick made their goal clear, to dominate and replace public and shared transportation.
Uber would not be where it is today if it weren't for a very special entity, the SFMTA.
That's the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. Uber started as an SF exclusive, providing black cars that cost around 1.5 times a normal cab. In the next few years, Uber saw a ton of investment from venture capital funds and traditional investors. This huge influx of cash allowed them to do a simple trick: make Uber rides really cheap. Do you remember that? When an Uber was cheaper than a cab? The cheap cars let Uber dominate the market. Drivers from small taxi companies started Ubering because it's where all customers were, and at the time, the wages were good. Riders started defaulting to Uber rather than trying to hail a cab or even take public transit. And
because of the ease of access. It's again, like it's actually such an easy thing to understand. This is the problem that a lot of people don't understand with like, oh, why are people doing this? Why are people okay with this? It's very simple. It's because the service and the product is very good. And from the consumer perspective, like the individual consumer perspective, you're not thinking about the market. You're not thinking about how this affects an industry. You're thinking about what does this person do when they open the app? That experience is S tier.
everyone had the app on their phone. Uber had seized
no
the
brainer.
market.
Yeah, of course.
And they had their eyes on another market, food delivery, in 2014. But it doesn't make any business sense. The rides were cheaper than it possibly could cost to pay the drivers, cover other expenses, and still make a profit. How does any of this work? What's the business model? Cory Doctorow has a word for it.
Shittification is a theory I came up with to describe how platforms decay.
By platform, he means web platform. But this goes beyond the internet into real life. It's a three-phase process.
Phase one, the platform is good to its end users. The users pile in, they get locked in.
Think of Google or Facebook, platforms that started off free and were actually pretty good tools. Tools that slowly became nearly mandatory in modern life.
Yeah.
Phase two, confident that those users are locked in and aren't going to go anywhere. It makes things worse for those end users, and it gives treats to business customers.
So for Facebook or Google, that's when you realize that since you weren't paying for anything, you were the product being sold. And they both gave you up to data.
Yeah, if you don't pay for a product, you are the product. This is true. Even in free-to-play games, you're the plankton that whales eat.
Collectors and advertisers.
That's
knowing
true.
full well you'd made the platforms an essential part of your life.
There's lots of different technical tricks to lock in users. Like if you're Uber, you can drive all the taxis out of business and cause disinvestment in public transit. If you're Amazon, you can lock people in by getting them to pre-commit to buying a year's worth of shipping in advance with Prime.
Then
That's right.
comes phase three.
Once those business customers are also locked in, it takes away all that surplus and it gives it to itself.
Let's apply that to Uber. They made Uber easy to use, cheap, and readily available. Then started to pay drivers less and overwork them. And now...
Well, that's what you do, right? Step one is you have to corner the market. Step two is then you make as much money out of the market as possible, right? Yeah, it's the 4 phases of companies, the exact same thing. It's a very old idea. Yeah, so this is what you do, right? Is it, like, there are a lot of terms for this. One of them is called dumping, right? Where it's like you put a bunch of products on a market at an extremely low price in order to make sure that a competitor isn't able to sell their product and they go out of business. So the best thing for a company to have is a monopoly. No company wants a free market because a free market holds them accountable to their actions. So the best thing for you to do when you're in a free market is to make it not free. You want a price fix? Like, think about all the things that are against the law. Well, the closer that you can get to doing those things, the better off you're going to be. Step one, monopolize. Exactly. Isn't dumping illegal? Yes, it is illegal. And the reason why is because it does this. But my point is that the reason why it's illegal, do you want to know why dumping is illegal? Because it works. It works. And it absolutely does. You think about it, right? If you had like, oh yeah, am I going to buy this new product for $100 or buy the other product that they're selling for $10 that does basically the same thing? Everybody's going to buy the $10 product, right? So a lot of things that they make against the law in business, the reason why they're against the law is because of how effective they are. And if you had the opportunity to do this, you could make a way more money. And I think a good example of this is WoW. Look at, for example, in MMOs. Think about all of the cheap tricks that people do and the ways that people can corner markets and the way that that negatively affects other people in the game. But because the game doesn't have rules against that, there's no FTC in Azeroth or in some other video game, then it just happens on its own. So I remember what I would do is I would just buy out everything of a certain item and then I would just put it up at a higher price and then people had to buy it. And yeah, I would lose money in some cases, but in the greater scheme of things, I wouldn't lose money. Did that always?
They're
Yeah, exactly.
finally starting to bring in money. At that time, the vast majority of food orders were still normal orders placed over the phone. Remember that? You'd call the actual pizzeria or Chinese place or whatever, and a guy who worked there would bring you your food.
And this is also another reason, like it's another small thing, but because you don't have to make a phone call, people are going to be more willing to do it. Most people don't want to talk on the phone. They would rather just be able to do it through an app without having to interface with a person. So because you could just do that on DoorDash, you didn't have to talk to the person at the pizza store. This was an automatic value. Instantly created value.
Pay him for the food, tip him, and no billionaire middleman was involved. It made sense. But the delivery companies decided to
But there was friction with that because you had to deal with a real person and talk to that person, and people didn't want to have to do that.
Seamless and Grubhub told restaurants their menu prices had to be the same online and in store, so the restaurants couldn't make customers absorb the commission, but also making it so the customer thought delivery apps were cost effective, eliminating whatever competitive advantage that direct ordering had. Then they made a real mob-like move. They bought up domain names of restaurants they did business.
Grubhub is buying up thousands of restaurant web addresses. Man. That's smart. That's fucking smart. This is fucking impressive, man. That happened to my restaurant? Oh, that's good. Yeah. It doesn't make sense? Yeah, it does. Because if you go to that website, it probably redirects to Grubhub.
The restaurants they did business with so that those restaurants couldn't get their own business online.
That's right.
Basically forcing any restaurant that wanted to get business via people Googling them to work with Grubhub. Then came the new delivery thing, what we're really talking about here. Uber Eats and DoorDash. Grubhub was restaurants using their own drivers, but Uber Eats and DoorDash were something new. They had their own gig workers, contractors with no benefits, responsible for their own vehicles, fuel, insurance, going to the restaurants, picking up the orders, and delivering them to customers.
That's right.
And Uber Eats had the power of scale. Everyone had Uber on their phones already. And they just applied the strategy they did originally.
And that's again what I was saying about how ease of access is the most important thing. If you don't have ease of access with a product, you're going to be in such a bad situation. You need to have the ease of access.
With cars, making everything impossibly cheap.
They had the surplus, right? They had a ton of money from the capital markets, and they gave it to us, people who wanted to eat dinner. They heavily discounted the food that we got, paid the restaurants full price, but they charged us less than they were paying. Well, that's a pretty good deal, right? And if that's all they ever did, hell, I'm all for it, right? Let Peter Thiel buy me dinner every night from now until the end of time.
They wanted you hooked, so when they raised prices, you'd keep using their service. Once they'd used their venture capital cash to gain market share, they jacked up prices. Now, most people go to Uber or DoorDash first if they want to order food, meaning restaurants
Of course, right? That's the thing. Is again, like if you get people inside of a habit of doing something, the control of that is absolutely massive. We didn't know what happened until a customer called in and said that they went to search for our restaurant on Google. They got redirected to Uber, and we called them about it. Unethical, but it doesn't seem illegal. I don't know whether it's illegal or not, but they're doing it, right? And it's definitely a good business move. Like if you were them and you were trying to like control market share, you would be doing this. Like let's take ethics and morality out of the question. Does this work? I bet it works.
Hold into the apps too, otherwise no one will order from them. Uber charges restaurants huge fees to be listed on the app, and it's a tiered service, so the more the restaurant pays, the better visibility they have on the app. Meaning when you search Thai food, the top results aren't the highest rated, closest, or anything like that. They're who pays the most. And Uber pushes this marketing service on all of the restaurants, meaning if every Thai restaurant buys the same tier, it becomes meaningless. They're all equal no matter how much they pay. The only entity that wins is Uber Eats.
Everybody gets screwed by the platform in the two-sided market.
And unlike...
To be fair, like, a lot of these places, like I know Domino's, for example, doesn't do Uber Eats or DoorDash. And the reality is that because of that, I don't get Domino's hardly ever. Because, like, there's an extras they do now. Well, I don't know. Let me see if they do. I'm going to check right now. Give me a minute. No, I want to know about this. Well, I don't know about, like, I'm saying for DoorDash, Domino's is not here in Austin. I don't know what's happening besides that, but it's not here in Austin.
Seamless and Grubhub, menu prices on Uber Eats are often higher in-app than direct from the restaurant, because Uber Eats encourages this to restaurants to offset fees. They openly recommend it. Generally, a middleman, like a distributor, only makes money once. They buy something and sell it to someone else for a profit.
Right.
Uber Eats makes money off the restaurant and on the exorbitant fees they charge customers.
Yep.
I went through my email and found an old Seamless receipt from 2019. And I made the same exact order on Uber Eats, except
5 years and it went up by 50%. Oh my God. Holy fucking shit. Wow. They all have to work with Uber because they're all franchises, not necessarily corporate owned? Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. A lot of fast food places in my city are offering crazy deals if you order from their own websites directly, and even on Uber and DoorDash orders, they include flyers with those private offers. Yeah, that's smart. And this is the thing, right? I mean, it just takes time for a market like this to change. That's nuts. Also, look at, by the way, the chicken fried rice. Like the chicken with broccoli, it was $6.50. Now it's $9.95. That is crazy.
the restaurant weirdly doesn't have chicken fried rice anymore, so I just got egg fried rice.
Yeah.
Free chicken, if you will. It came out to 33% more than it did in 2019, and that's accounting for inflation. Then there's this story about a woman in Seattle getting a single coffee delivered for $25. Yeah, there's a lot of absurdity in that sentence, from the price to the very act of getting a single cup of coffee delivered.
Yeah.
This especially...
I feel like if you're getting food delivered, though, this is a luxury service to an extent. So, like, my sympathy for people that are like, oh, it costs so much money, it's so much money. Well, then stop fucking spending the money. What are you doing spending fucking $30 to get a cup of coffee delivered? Just go over there and get it. I mean, I'm sorry, but like, let's be honest here. Ordering a coffee online, yeah. Like, if I want to get a milkshake delivered, it's going to be expensive. But that's because you're taking it's business, right? Everybody probably here has taken at least one business class. We understand the difference between a fixed cost and a variable cost. So the gas price to go to and from the restaurant to pick up an order is a fixed cost. So it doesn't matter whether you're picking up one cup of coffee or 10 cups of coffee, the cost is going to be the same. So if you're buying a very small order or you're getting a very small amount of things, well, guess what happens? Those things are going to have that fixed cost that are going to be put all on them. That's why buying in bulk is high value. That's the whole point.
Bothered me because this was in an article alleging that the high fees were entirely due to new laws in Seattle ensuring
people say no shit. Oh yeah. No, bro, like I'm telling you, this is not a no shit situation. A lot of people don't fucking understand this.
In an article alleging that the high fees were entirely due to new laws in Seattle ensuring delivery workers a fair wage. But it makes sense customers would blame the minimum wage. The delivery apps tell you to. Seattle customers, like New York customers, see regulatory fees for operating expenses, often explicitly blaming requirements put in place to guarantee a minimum hourly pay.
And this is so smart for them to do this, because what they're doing is they're creating it's effectively like class war, right? And like there's a degree of like resentment for it. Because now it's like it shifts the blame. So now you're mad at the government. Now you're mad at these other people for wanting a fair wage. That's very smart for them to do.
The apps could just roll these costs into the existing fees and never tell us what it's for. But they want you to blame the wage laws. In Seattle, the $25 coffee article came during a debate to roll back minimum wage protections.
That's right.
That's a clear attempt by Uber and DoorDash to affect public opinion on the law.
Absolutely.
Imagine the app had an executive pay fee or a shareholder dividends fee, explaining the real reason you had to pay an extra $6 was to directly hand it to a venture capital billionaire who just really wanted it. I posted this line about the $25 coffee on Twitter without thinking too much about it, dunking on the customer for being upset about the price.
Right.
It's an easy villain to paint. A lazy, privileged person complaining that the servant she hired to bring her a single coffee is making too much money. But she's not really the villain. In the greater class battle...
Well, I mean, she still is. She signed up to do that. She said, I want the coffee for $26. That's what the fee is. You don't want it, don't buy it. You're not a victim of high prices. Like, that's not how it works. You're paying for a luxury service. And if you have the luxury service, you're only getting one thing. Obviously, it's going to be higher because of the fixed cost of the labor that's used and the gas that's used. It's common sense. It's like, for example, if you're taking a private jet and you have one person in the private jet, that's going to be extremely expensive. That's why you have multiple people in the private jet, and then the jet becomes a fucking airline, and that's how they make money. If every Southwest airline flight only had one person on it, the business couldn't run.
She's on the same side as the driver against the venture capital billionaires. It's almost a meme, the guilt you feel when you order Uber Eats when you see all the fees attached. But it's okay to want convenience. Corey was adamant about this after I joked about the $25 coffee on our call.
There's nothing wrong with wanting something that's more convenient, right? Like, I don't think it's a sin to not want to spend your money, and I don't think it's a sin to not want to have to work extra hard to get through your day. The problem is that there's like a false promise, and that false promise then uses investor capital to crowd out the actual viable systems.
People expect convenience today because Silicon Valley billionaires created a false promise of a more convenient world that is affordable. But really, they just...
Well, that is affordable. That's the one that's complex, right? But I will tell you, as somebody who uses Uber and uses DoorDash, and I've done this before, I don't really use Uber a lot, and I don't use this stuff a lot, but I've used it. The service for this has been extremely convenient, and it's absolutely something that I would recommend. It's great.
Set up a system to funnel more of your money to themselves. Innovation is good, and it's okay to make money off of innovation. But what these people are doing is finding parts of everyday life that are working just fine and forcing themselves in as middlemen to transfer even greater wealth to themselves. They did it to dating. The rise of dating apps made it harder to meet people in person because the apps became the new status quo.
Yeah.
And now most of these apps charge exorbitant...
Well, let's keep in mind also that there are like events that you can go to for dating in real life, and a lot of people choose not to do that. The reason why dating apps are the norm is because that's what people choose to do. There's less friction, there's less awkwardness, there's less problems. Yeah, I don't see how this is it's crazy that like in order to understand the value proposition of a product, you have to understand the consumer psychology. And I think this video, like I agree with what he's saying, but I think this video downplays the convenience and the consumer psychology that goes into why people prefer dating apps and why people prefer Uber and why people prefer DoorDash. There is a massive amount of convenience and psychology that goes into that, and those apps maximize and take advantage of that to the fullest extent. Convenient doesn't mean better, though. I mean, it actually kind of does, right? Like, assuming all other things are equal, something being more convenient makes it better. There's never going to be a situation where something being more convenient, with all other things, again, being equal, will make it worse.
Fees to be useful at all. And they're doing it to healthcare. Like those bogus telehealth companies where the founders end up in prison. Or these networks that do nothing but
Jesus.
connect you to doctors to rip off you and your insurance provider. Or this doctor in a box. Or streaming
What the
apps where
fuck?
access to content is easy, but prices keep going up and creator wages keep going down.
Yeah.
Or meditation and prayer apps that are basically adding a middleman to you just sitting quietly and thinking. They want you to pay to access your own mind. We've built a supposedly utopia.
This is because people think that they're getting value out of it. If you oversimplify anything, I think that it doesn't really make sense. But you have to understand like what the consumer is getting out of any sort of a product. And when you understand that, then everything else begins to make sense. As a restaurant owner and partner with Uber Eats, it is convenient. I get a lot of customers without buying ads. Oh yeah, absolutely. If people weren't getting a value out of these different like meditation apps and stuff, then they wouldn't be using them. So just because the value is something that's stupid doesn't mean that it's not something that's valuable. Like sex dolls are a good example with this. A lot of people think that, well, you're a loser if you buy one of these. Well, you can think that and you can be right, but that still doesn't stop people from being losers and buying them. So you have to understand the psychology and why somebody does something. And when you understand that, everything else fits together and makes perfect sense. People pay for convenience. Yes, convenience. And this is especially true now because like you have so many things now. Like how many of you guys, your work week is not limited to 40 hours because you have extra tasks that you have to do on your phone or different types of follow-ups that you have to do that's beyond that, right? Like just in one way or another. Yeah, we all have this, right? Unemployed? Yeah, good for you. But like a lot of people have this. So as people's time becomes more valuable because there's less of it, because more time is taken up by work and other tasks that just exist in the world, that makes the existing time that they do have more valuable, which makes them more likely to spend money to save that time and make the most out of that time as much as they can. They're neat maxing. Yeah, they're time maxing, right? That's smart. So that's why it happens. Like being able to solve a problem. Like here's a great example with Starforge. You can make your own PC and you can do it, I guarantee you, unless there's like a weird graphics CPU shortage, for probably less money than any computer developer or parts manufacturer like computer builder can make it for. Like guaranteed, if you buy the parts yourself and you put them together, you can do it for less money. But the value that it provides is enough to where people buy the PCs. It's literally just that simple. It's the same as mowing your own lawn or changing your own oil. It's very, very, very simple to do that. And if you like, and this is the problem, is that a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands don't understand the value of time to a person who doesn't have a lot of time. So it's hard to explain that to a person who either has intimate knowledge with, like, let's say PC repair or PC development. So for them, like, oh, it's not a big deal. You just make a PC and it's, you just put it together, follow a guide. But what they don't understand is that following the guide and everything that they know about that, this is in the context of 10 years of understanding of PCs and just ancillary knowledge that they can piece together. Whereas a new person who's truly new or unconfident doesn't want to take that risk. So understanding that and how a product makes a person comfortable is extremely, extremely important. Right into money? Yeah. Like consumer psychology, like a lot of people, everybody thinks that the only vector of sales is price. This is completely wrong. And I actually don't even think price is in the top 3. The highest vector that sales really bases off of is value. And value is something that does not necessarily have money attached to it. It's about the product. It's about the experience. It's about the follow-up. It's about being able to rely on the product maintaining value. All of these things make a very big difference. And how many of you guys, in a lot of cases, have gone with something that was more expensive because they gave a more comprehensive experience that improved, like your purchase? You see what I'm saying? Yeah, without a doubt. Exactly. Yeah, you get what you pay for. So a lot of times people don't understand the way sales work because they don't understand the psychology the person is looking at. Because ultimately, this person, when you're selling something to a person, they're not buying a thing. If this makes sense, this is kind of an abstract idea, but they're not buying a thing. They're looking for you to solve their problem, and you solve their problem with your thing, with like, let's say, I don't know, a car or like a computer or something like that. But more than that, the problem does not exist inside of that car, inside of that computer. It exists beyond that as well, like with repairs or with like, let's say you order your food, they bring the food to your table. That's an additional value. So that's why these apps are extremely popular. And that's why a lot of these things are extremely popular, is because they create that value.
Tech economy around the same issues that plagued all of previous industry.
The Apple II Plus went on shelves the year Ronald Reagan hit the campaign trail for his first presidential run, right? These are two factors that have grown up at the same time. So all of the policies that define neoliberalism, weak labor protection, weak antitrust protection, and so on, get more extreme as tech gets bigger. The capital markets did not open the sluice gates to funding them until it became clear that you can cheat the labor laws by saying it's not a labor violation, we did it with an app. You can cheat privacy and say it's not a privacy violation, we did it with an app. You can cheat consumer rights and say it's not a ripoff, it's not a bait and switch, we did it with an app.
And what are they really even providing? It comes down to two things: supposedly innovative technology and scale. But now that innovation is broadly available, anyone could build a simple app like Uber's or DoorDash's. So it's just about scale. It doesn't have to be this way. Without us, from which the venture capital billionaires derive value, they have nothing. Order directly from restaurants that will let you. Get pickup from the ones that won't. Support worker power movement.
Well, why would you do that? This is the problem. Is that why would you take an extra step if you don't have to? And this is one of the big issues that a lot of people that try to advocate for change don't really understand, is that most people don't really care about any issue that they're pretending to care about. They only really care about the convenience that issue poses to them. So if the solution makes the problem more inconvenient than it originally was, then the solution is even worse. Yeah, the value is always subjective, exactly. And also, like, why would I, like, now I have to order from a restaurant, so I have to give the restaurant my address, and then the restaurant is sending me emails and, like, trying to, like, text me with different, like, how many of you guys have had this happen, right? You give your phone to something, and then they start spamming you with text messages. Like, all of these things are values, and it's annoying. It's fucking annoying. So there's a reason why these apps are so popular. And it's like, there's like 50 different reasons. He's making a video to persuade people to care, though. But what I'm saying is that none of these things hold value to the user. Like, whether it's like, like any problem that a restaurant has, the users don't care about that. There's no issue to that at all. Like, it's like, the restaurant's making people work. Like, we don't care. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, how do I know that people don't care? Because they're willing to buy phones made in cobalt mines. They're willing to buy Nike shoes that are made by sweatshops. Nobody really cares about this problem. People like to pretend to care, but they don't actually care. And they only cared, people care about problems like this to the extent that it is not inconvenient.
It's like Los Deliveristas Unidos, the New York-based collective of delivery drivers working to seize back power from the venture capitalists. Encourage the government to fight app monopolies like Lena Khan's FTC. And don't believe the apps when they try to turn us against each other. When you see a driver minimum wage fee, don't blame the driver. Blame the executives and venture capitalists whose fees show up nowhere on your receipt.
Yep.
Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support more journalism like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there's another example of corporate greed or anything like that that you want us to take a look at, let us know in the comments.
Should they even care? The problem is that being able to understand how this issue can negatively affect a customer is so abstract that it's impossible to communicate to a person without them completely losing interest. And this is what the issue is, right? And I understand, like, this is the video. It's a good video. I just think that, again, I think the guy is massively downplaying the value that these apps provide. It's so easy to say, oh, all of these apps are stupid and bad and useless and nobody wants them. Of course we can all say that, absolutely. But why are people using them? It's like, it's one of these things where it's like, it's one of these things that's very popular to say, but when you actually think about whether it's true or not, it becomes evident, so evident, that it's very clearly not true. These apps do provide a massive value, but the value is psychological. It's not something that's necessarily on the, it's not on the receipt here. It's something that now I didn't have to talk to the person. I can have it delivered directly to my house. I don't have to think about it. The app has everything on it, so I don't have to download anything new. Like, all of these individual things are extremely valuable. And if you can't really quantify them, but you can when you look at whether people make a decision on it or not. And they do make that decision. You're shilling us? Well, I'm not necessarily, like, in a way, yeah. It's 100% psychological. Yes, it is. And that's why, like, for example, when people are complaining about high prices for a product, the way that a company should approach that, the immediate solution should not always be to lower the prices. Sometimes the solution should be to increase the value of the product. And that's why, like, if a company does that, they can maintain their prices and sometimes even increase them. If you're getting shilled, it's up to your mental. Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't expect the entire world to, baby-proof itself because you can't control yourself, right? I mean, like, let's be honest here. It's a little bit of convenience, a bit of a monopoly. I think a monopoly definitely is an issue, yeah. But the other problem is that a consumer wants a monopoly. In terms of consumer convenience, a monopoly is best, because they don't have to go to a bunch of other things. Let me give you an example. Wouldn't it be great if every single video game was on Steam? Monopoly can be good or bad. It's like the words king or dictator. Yeah, but, like, usually it's bad. And, like, it's the same with anything, right? I mean, there can be something that's bad with anything or not, right? I stopped ordering those via in my country because the delivery drivers don't deliver to your door. If you live in an apartment building, you have to go down and meet them. Lazy ass fuckers. Exactly. People are so fucking lazy. And if you capitalize on people being lazy, you'll be a fucking billionaire.